So let's move on now to the Assange hearing, now that we have Christy here. We're now 3 weeks into the most important trial on our freedom of speech. We've covered week 1 and 2 with Dak and Christy. You can find those videos on my channel video list. All of my guests here on my panel have also covered the case on their respective channels. Um, Julian Assange is still facing off against the Kangaroo Court in Old Bailey in London, so that he can be extradited to the U.S. and face 175 years in prison. And just a reminder to everybody, he is a non-U.S. citizen who operated outside of the U.S. and is being prosecuted under the archaic U.S. espionage hearing. On day 9, which is Friday, September 18th, the public discovered that Assange, he was given an offer by the Trump administration that he could be pardoned if he disclosed the name of the person who gave him the DNC email leaks. And just a reminder to everybody, he is not on trial for the DNC email leaks. On Sunday, which is September 20th, it was reported that over 100 eminent political figures, including 13 past and present heads of state, numerous ministers, members of parliament, and diplomats, denounced the illegality of the Assange proceedings and appealed for his immediate release. Among these figures were former president of Bolivia, Evo Morales, current president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, Jeremy Corbyn, former president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, former U.S. Senator Mike Gravel, and many others. On day 10, Fairbanks testifies Trump ordered Assange's arrest, and the U.S. concedes that WikiLeaks was not the first to publish cables, but says that it had the widest reach. On day 11, James Lewis, the lead prosecutor, asserted that Assange exaggerated his symptoms of depression. On day 12, the court continued the discussion of Assange's mental health, including a new diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome. The defense was making the case that the condition would make Assange unfit for high security imprisonment. Lewis, the lead prosecutor, had to be given an elementary school explanation of how the autism spectrum works. The defense also continued to emphasize how insidious and illegal the tactics that the U.S. is employing while he was confined in the Ecuadorian embassy. And today, they proceeded to discuss more on Assange's mental health and his risk of suicide. And the prosecution witness also left out the reason why Assange was sent to Belmarsh Medical Ward. So, Dak and Christy, do you guys want to elaborate more on what occurred during the hearings?
Yeah, so to go back to the Trump pardon, this was something that has been discussed. It's sometimes interesting to me to listen to what's been disclosed during the day, during the court hearings, because many of these things we knew about and talked about, but the public is maybe now hearing for the very first time now that it's being talked about in court, or at least the mainstream media is starting to report on it for maybe one of the first times. And Dak and I discussed this on our channel and our show about how principled of a man Julian Assange is to refuse that pardon by giving up a source. The whole basis of WikiLeaks is to protect its sources. It's what they are known for. It's what they built their reputation on. So regardless on if the Russian source or the source was Russian, if it was not Russian, he's not going to give it up. Whether the source is now deceased or not, he's not going to give it up. And, I think many people were surprised at that. And I tweeted about it, that this is just more evidence to show you what a principled person Julian Assange is and how he continues to stand by protecting his sources. Another example is Edward Snowden was not a WikiLeaks source, but WikiLeaks helped protect him. So so we've sort of devolved now into discussing Julian Assange's mental state, including psychiatrists on both sides that have interviewed him and gone over his other doctors' notes. Some people have made diagnoses based on their discussions with him. Some have just made it based on other doctors' notes. Julian Assange is having every intimate detail of his life aired out right now, as has been happening over the last decade. But really, we're really getting to the nitty-gritty of what he's been going through and struggling with mentally over the past almost 2 years now since being in prison in Belmarsh.
What do you have to say about all this, Dak?
What do I have to say about all of it? I mean, we'd be here all night. It is undeniable that this judge, Vanessa Baratzer, has obviously been in the pocket of the American government from the very beginning. She has tilted the field so severely that it's basically upside down. But one of the things that Christy and I discussed in our video is that the American public is not paying any attention whatsoever to this extradition hearing. I mean, you don't see any part of the story covered in the mainstream press, which is interesting because if the American public was so bloodthirsty towards Assange, if the American public believed that Assange needed to be tried and hanged for his crimes against humanity, then it's very strange that they would not pay any attention to his extradition hearing, because for all they know, the judge could rule in his favor and let him go free, and then he would never answer the call of justice. You know, there is a remarkable inconsistency in their attitudes in 2019 versus their attitudes today. Makes you wonder why that guy in Des Moines assaulted me for supporting Assange if it didn't even matter enough for him to pay attention to it now. But one of the things I wanted to mention is that this kangaroo court in England, this is something that the American citizens are paying for with their tax dollars. Craig Murray has talked about the litany of attorneys that have been hired by the American government to interrogate defense witnesses. And I have no idea how much they get paid, but it must be an exorbitant sum. These are our taxpayer dollars going towards this after our taxpayer dollars covered the $10 billion price tag that the Ecuadorian government demanded to jettison him from the embassy in the first place. I mean, something tells me we could put this money towards a better endeavor, but these are the morals of the American citizens. It's no wonder that this empire is decadent and moribund, and that's why I don't really have a whole lot of confidence in trying to make it better. If the public can't even be stirred to any kind of reasonable interest, much less motivation in this case, what is it going to take for them to realize what the score is?
So, Jose, I know you guys over at Hard Lens have covered week 1 and week 2. So what are your impressions now of week 3 of the hearing?
I mean, I think it is a bit of a devolving in the arguments, but it is an important aspect of why this case matters. To the degree that the U.S. government was harassing and psychologically torturing Assange, this is a power that they have over almost anyone with their spying network. And this is something they can keep inflicting on journalistic sources around the world. If they normalize this is not torture, as that paranoia of someone being aware that they're being spied on and taking measures or ruining their life around that is normalized by the U.S. government as criminal behavior. That's a very dangerous precedent, especially if their reach is global, as they're demonstrating. The American public's been made ambivalent about Julian Assange. What they know is that he tried to screw Bush, and then he tried to school Obama, so he's just anti-U.S. There's a lot of character assassinations doesn't bear repeating, and then he's the one that ultimately helped Putin, helped Trump, helped screw Clinton. So cult of personality, especially in the mainstream media, have completely suppressed the story to the detriment of any kind of industry challenging their power structure. So it really pays to the benefit of the people that run those corporate media networks. I did see Katie Halpert of Rolling Stone start covering the story, which is a little encouraging. Marianne Williamson finally tweeted something out about it. Overt harassment maybe of people will get them to move, or maybe, understanding the situation and what's at stake. I personally, don't think that character assassinations of Assange bear repeating anymore, considering all that he's been put through. I do think that, his mom's been in the forefront of get all the politics away from this and please just save this man's life. And to the degree that especially Daniel Ensberg's, when he took the stand, I think was most fundamental for the defense to fixate on the only precedent in this case whatsoever was what happened to him. And in that case, the overt harassment of the U.S. government on him and his mental state was what they were able to let him go on. Mm-hmm. I do hope the judge rules in favor of just letting Assange go, and the American public has no idea and just goes about their day, because the idiots don't really deserve to be in tune. They're all panicking about whatever happens, in the corporate media the day after day after day. But that's likely to happen if this wasn't a kangaroo court. We know that this court is geared towards sending Assange to America. We know that they're here to normalize the torture that they've done on him. And I did say something funky at the beginning of the show. I felt like there was some kind of takeover I just feel like the US and England, because they went into Iraq alone as they were developing the tools of massive electronic spying, they share a militaristic bond that supersedes economics and politics. And Assange is a militaristic threat to the intelligence community in the US. And I wish that there were more people that can speak to that and mass media to inform people of this danger.
Yeah, it certainly is great that Rolling Stone, which is mainstream, is now discussing this thanks to Katie Halper. Marianne Williamson has evolved on this issue, and I want to hear from Dak after we hear from Jeff, who's also covered this with his guest. What do you make of the hearing so far, Jeff?
Well, I mean, if it were at all a fair court, there'd be no question of what the verdict would be, because the evidence has been overwhelmingly, just destroying the prosecution's arguments. Daniel Ellsberg especially, but, well, really the other witnesses too, just demolished them. But, we'll see whether that has any effect on the, way this turns out. But, I don't want to be too hard on the American people, because there's literally, other than, Tucker Carlson, there's literally been no mainstream media coverage whatsoever that I've seen of this case. And, the one and only member of Congress who's said anything about it is Tulsi Gabbard. Everyone else has been dead silent, despite much pressure put on them by my friend, comrade Misty from Twitter, who I had on my show to talk about this a couple of weeks ago. And many others of us have been constantly pressing these folks to speak out, and journalists too, and they won't say a word, even though like this is this is our freedom that's on the line here. And just nothing from the corporate media, almost nothing, or from our government.
Where are our warriors, the squad? Where is Bernie Sanders? And Dak has pleasure.
Well, Bernie Sanders never stood up for Assange, so he's not going to start now.
The pleasure of interviewing him. And you also interviewed Marianne Williamson. So what do you think about how she evolved on this issue?
Well, I mean, I didn't think her answer was particularly arousing, to put it quite simply. I mean, I didn't think that she really came out with a full-throated support for Assange. I mean, I think that she gave this timid, almost flaccid support for the concept of whistleblowing, but then she didn't say anything for a year. It wasn't until for whatever reason, the extradition hearing came across her timeline that she's decided to write a tweet in his defense. But I don't know what kind of clout she actually has, even as a public figure. She's not a member of the United States government, and the Democratic Party disrespected her so vehemently that they didn't even invite her to the convention. So I don't know what kind of pull she has in the government. I mean, in my interview with Daniel Burke, he suggested that perhaps Trump will listen to Glenn Greenwald because he recently appeared on Tucker Carlson tonight. But I'll celebrate when there's actually something to celebrate. I'm not going to get my hopes up until I see something actually happen. I mean, I've done my part. I went out, I got all those candidates on the record. I continue to write about his case. I continue to castigate writers who don't support Assange. I mean, beyond that, I'm not sure how much more I can do, being a relatively powerless citizen.
Christy, are you in agreement with Dak here?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, he went through what he's been doing. I've been doing my work on fronting different organizations and speaking out and trying to educate the public on Assange. And we're sort of at a stopgap as far as there's nobody in the government who's getting behind it. There's nobody who's rallying their own government or their fellow politicians to call for an end to this. If anything, the only rallying we've seen is when the 10 senators wrote a letter to Mike Pence before Assange was out of the embassy to get him out of the embassy. So we're not seeing any pull in the government as far as trying to halt this extradition. It does make me a bit cynical, as I don't think there will be anything when he's brought here either, because like I said many times, we barely get any coverage now that it's in the UK, but when it is brought to the US, we're going to have even less coverage. And then, you know, what is going to convince the politicians that they need to care then? Even with even less media coverage, the citizens aren't really speaking up. Most of the time when people do try to contact their local representatives, they are very ill-educated on the situation, typically believe the Russiagate smears. And so it is an uphill battle of trying to re-educate even the politicians on this case. And I got to experience asking the Democratic candidates with Dak and just sort of getting that flaccid answer of, I don't know much about this case. I can't really answer it. And that's incredibly frustrating for somebody who's running for office not to know about the biggest press freedom case in our lifetime. I mean, that should be a litmus test for anybody running for any office, local or federal. Like, what are you doing if you're not paying attention to this? And unfortunately, nobody in the government is really paying attention to this. Or the other option is that they do agree with it. They do agree with the Trump administration and they are happy this is happening. And so they are going to just stand by and let it keep steamrolling on its way over here.
So, Jose, I know you were a big supporter of Bernie's. Would you say that he is the one who holds the biggest influence right now in spreading awareness about Assange? And what do you think will take for us to convince him to spread the word about what's happening to Assange right now to everybody?
I'm not convinced he has the biggest pull. It'd be nice if he did. Assange remains a militaristic threat in the eyes of the intelligence community. So no elected official wants to overstep the intelligence community except Tulsi Gabbard for whatever relationship she shares with them. If I were Bernie, I'd call her up and lean into that because he doesn't want to go off script with the intelligence community because everything they've attacked him on is being soft on foreign policy that's U.S. centric. So it is frustrating that, he doesn't keep seeing stuff about Bolivia, that he's letting Biden basically saber rattle against Venezuela. I'm aware that Evo Morales is in Mexico right now, and that the president of Mexico is interested in what's going on here with this election. There's a lot of things going on, but I would say that waiting for Trump to pardon Assange isn't the worst move either. I do think that Glenn Greenwald is playing it, probably the smartest, playing into Trump's ego. I do think that Trump, win or lose, wants to normalize his presidency as a winner, as a victory, as a business genius and global mogul, and leaving office, pardoning Assange is a big FU to the intelligence community ain't bad, win or lose. So I do think that Trump benefits a lot by pardoning Assange. I think we all do. And if that were to happen, I'd be more interested in who's the first to jump in and say, I'm glad that he did that.
All right, do you guys want to give any closing remarks here before we move on?
Free Assange, and any journalist who does not deserve to be called a journalist.
Yeah, definitely free Assange. You guys all spoke really well, and I'm really glad I got to hear from all of you.